Now, what kinds of treatment? Is there any hope at all? This paints a pretty grim picture, but it's my personal feeling that there is some hope presently, but there is actually maybe a cure for these diseases, and I'll explain that in a minute. At the present time, there's a drug known as azithromycin, which is actually like junk food for viruses. What it does is that the virus preferentially uses this for making itself, leads to a defect in virus production. Azithromycin is like junk food for viruses, and the virus dies out in the body. But the problem is this drug also makes the body die out, so it's like junk food for humans in a sense. That is not very satisfactory. There are many other products that are being worked on. Some people think that there will be a vaccine development, and of course we all hope that's true, but as explained previously, I think that's impossible for two reasons. There are alternative doctors who believe that such things as high-dose vitamin C, zinc, selenium, and other chemicals besides or in addition to AZT are useful in prolonging life. But the bottom line of that is my own personal experience has been I have yet to see a single person who was documented with AIDS, the disease, who has been cured. Convincingly cured. I don't believe that I have seen a single person yet who actually meets those criteria. Although we hear a lot about it. There is, I think, a technique that may exist and has been broached by Baylor recently, which holds the cure for not only this disease, but perhaps many other virus diseases. The principle of this cure is very simple. The principle is just like if you have a crystal glass and you irradiate it with a proper audio tone, if you're holding that glass and you sing the proper note, the glass shatters, but your hand doesn't fall apart.
This demonstration shows how high-frequency radio waves can shatter crystal, and viruses are crystalline structures.
Now, in 1925 to 1945 or so, what I feel was perhaps the greatest inventor of all times, Raymond Roy Rife, or Royal Rife, said that he could take viruses, which are little crystals, irradiate them with the proper radio wave, and cause their disruption without disrupting human tissue. Most doctors say, well, that's of course nonsense. And you say, well, doctor, you don't think that we can destroy viruses with light or shake them to death? And they say no. And then you say, well, doctor, what kind of techniques do you use in your laboratory to kill viruses when they're blown out your hoods where you're experimenting? And what they use is ultraviolet lights. And what's UV light? That is nothing more than electromagnetic radiation of the proper wavelength. So it's a proven fact, beyond anybody's misrepresentation, that electromagnetic radiation of the proper form can kill viruses. Now, recently published in some medical journals and published in several newspapers was a report out of Baylor University, which had done the following. They had taken blood, which was contaminated with herpes virus, with cytomegalovirus, and with AIDS virus, and they had irradiated the blood with laser light and shown that they could kill the virus without killing the cells. So the cells were still viable, but the viruses had been destroyed. And of course that broaches the very topic of electromagnetic cure of viral diseases. And it's my feeling that this is where the actual cure for the AIDS virus will come. It's theoretically possible that someday we may actually have a machine which could identify, based upon the readings determined, what kind of virus you were infected with, and then treat the human being with a radio wave, which would destroy the virus contained not only in his blood, but in his entire body. If that, in fact, proves to be the case, I think that is the way that AIDS and other so-called human retroviruses, which in my opinion are nothing more than animal retroviruses now running in humans, can be not only cured, but eradicated from the world throughout. Now, why was Rife able to do these sort of magical things that he says that he could do? He may have been able to actually see the viruses. Rife was a master machinist, and he says that he invented a microscope with which he could actually view viruses in the living state. He says that the microscope had a magnification of 70 to 100,000 times in living tissue. Now, I don't know if Rife actually invented this machine and could view viruses in the living tissue, but I know that these machines actually exist. None of them are presently in working order, but if they in fact existed, and if in fact what Rife said is correct, that he could view viruses in the living state, of course, he may have been able then to determine what he called the mortal oscillatory rate, which was the frequency at which he would irradiate the virus or other bacteria to kill it. He called it an MOR, mortal oscillatory rate. And he says that in viewing them, he would irradiate these viruses with basically monochromatic light, which we today would think of as laser light. The virus would light up in a sense. It would absorb energy and emit energy. He could see them. And then by increasing the amplitude of the energy into the virus, that he could cause the virus to disrupt. In a sense, you can think about it just like the example given before of the crystal destroyed by the audio tone, or you can think of it like your house being shaken down during an earthquake. In summary, then, what have we got here? I've given you today the fact that the virus, I think, the AIDS virus pandemic, was not only present today, but predicted as far back as 1966 by McFarland Burnett and by Clemenson, who said, you better get ready for walking down the street and getting hit with a virus that causes leukemia or something else, just as we have. The fact that the virus may have been produced by crossing bovine leukemia virus and Visna virus to produce bovine Visna virus and adapted to grow in humans by growth in human tissue. The fact that the WHO in 1972 wrote an article that said, let's make a T-cell destroying virus. So they crossed a T-trophic virus with the great destroyer of Visna to make a T-cell destroyer. And then is it just coincidence that the AIDS pandemic in Africa occurs at the same vaccination centers where the smallpox was conducting, where the WHO was conducting its smallpox eradication programs? What are the myths of AIDS? AIDS is a homosexual disease is obviously a myth, that it's going to have a very short incubation period, that it came from African green monkeys, that it's going to die out in heterosexuals, that it's no problem, et cetera, et cetera. All these things I call the myth information of AIDS, and I've covered all that. And then the final is what can we expect to cure this virus, not only in the near future, but perhaps for all times. And I think that the cure for AIDS will lie in the reconstruction or redevelopment of electromagnetic or electrophysiologic techniques which will allow for identification and perhaps for then obliteration of viruses either in blood extracorporeally circulated and treated extracorporeally or actually irradiated as man with a radio wave or carrier wave passing through them and destroying the virus inside the human.